Bonjour, Madame and Monsieur. It's my first time in France, and I'm very excited to be here. So thanks for having me. And let me introduce myself first. My name is Yegor Ostapenko. I am the game designer at GCF Game World, and this is how I looked before I started working in AAA games. Last month marked the 10th anniversary for me in this amazing industry. And before joining GC back in 2021, I had the pleasure of working in outsourcing, a publishing house, in indie teams, so different things. While working on S.T.A.L.K.E.R.2, I had an opportunity to be involved in different features like items, world building, HUD, PDA, settings, and other things. However, today I would like to focus on a very specific and unique feature of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. universe, which are artifacts, and specifically what was the process of delivering this feature and what was the production. And I can assure you that this experience can be upscaled or downscaled. So if you have items in your games, this will be useful for you. First, let's make sure that everyone knows what S.T.A.L.K.E.R. is. Are there any S.T.A.L.K.E.R. fans here? Oh, I'm pleased. So you can correct me if I'm wrong with my facts. S.T.A.L.K.E.R. is a franchise that was started by GSC Game World back in 2007, when the first game, S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Shadow of Chernobyl, was released. After initial success, it was continued by two more titles, including S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Clear Sky and S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Call of Pripyat, which were out in the following 2 years. Essentially, being the first-person shooter, survival horror titles, they became a staple and a trademark of the Ukrainian video game industry for years to come. The game is set in alternative reality, where a mysterious disaster happened at the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and it further contaminated the surrounding areas with radiation and caused strange changes in local fauna and flora. The game was powered by proprietary X-ray engine. It was... I think we need to do it a little bit like this. So yeah, it was powered by its own engine, and you can see an intro from the game, a little bit of it. And one of the things... Okay, I ruined it. So, as you can see, there are certain bits in the video which look like from real life. And this is because the game was one of the first to use photogrammetry. And what does it mean? It means that the crew, they actually went to Chernobyl, and they took a lot of photos, and they tried to use those like as textures and put them on 3D objects. And this was my intention to demonstrate in this video, but it's a little bit tricky. So I wonder if there will be any more videos. Yes, this will be one of my favorite parts. Just look at this like chicken leg. It's like revolution in video games, right?
What have you got?
A body.
Okay.
It came from the Death Truck.
Let's go. By August 2021, over 15 million of total sales to the franchise happened, and it's a big deal for Ukraine. This specific trilogy edition was also released on Switch, so if you're a Switch person, you have an opportunity to play it as well. Over the years, S.T.A.L.K.E.R. IP gathered a big community around itself, and also a modding community. And on the photo here, you can see S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Fest that took place in Kiev in 2009, and it was attended by 200,000 people. And just recently, all 3 games were re-released and were remastered and are available on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. And they also have full French localization, so you have no excuse not to try. 15 years forward, with its release in 2024, S.T.A.L.K.E.R. once again became a frontier of technological innovations, being one of the first games to use Unreal Engine 5. Apart from utilizing popular technologies, cheap technologies like Lumen and Nanite, one of the distinctive features of S.T.A.L.K.E.R.2 was use of world partition. It's a tool that allows to create big open worlds with no loading screens while exploring. Basically, it allowed us to create a world which is 60 square kilometers, so the map is huge. And it's 8 times bigger than original S.T.A.L.K.E.R. series. Overall, it's safe to say that S.T.A.L.K.E.R. 2 introduced much more content compared to original games, including world map, locations, NPCs, weapons, equipment, and other assets. Which apparently also had effects on sales, and it took only 2 days to sell 1 million copies worldwide, and we reached 6 million people in 3 months after release. But enough of the history and impressive numbers, let's focus on visuals.
Stalkers often say everyone has a different path to the zone. But I think it's more like the zone calls us all in different voices. Are you ready to see the truth?
What? You don't like it? Well, this is just the beginning. The zone is no stranger to death.
You'll never get anywhere in the zone if you're afraid of your own failures. I think the truth is worth taking a risk.
If you're so eager to risk your life, I won't try to stop you. I guess you stalkers just need to experience everything firsthand.
You think you can change the zone?
Then, you don't know the zone well enough. It's time.
Good hunting, Stalker. Good hunting.
Okay, so the game is pretty now. Now, I assume that everyone has a little bit more information about S.T.A.L.K.E.R., if you didn't know. So let's get back to the artifacts and their role within the S.T.A.L.K.E.R. universe. Artifacts are items in the world that spawn in the anomalies scattered around the zone. There are 4 types of artifacts: thermal, chemical, electric, and gravitational. I will use this color coding, like these little circles of different colors, throughout the presentation, so hopefully they make sense. Based on their type and rarity, artifacts grant their owners with different buffs, and which help them survive in the zone. An example, a common gravitational artifact increases maximum weight a character can carry. This makes them very valuable, and one of the reasons for stalkers to risk their lives and venture deeper into the zone. And they do it, if not for the sake to learn their secrets, then for a big check from the trader. However, finding an artifact is not an easy feat, since they are not visible unless players are using specific tools, as also known as detectors, not static, and strafe within the anomaly they have spawned in. So, to summarize, stalkers need to explore the zone, look for anomalies, and decide if they are ready to perish while trying to get these artifacts. Once they get the taste of their benefits, the urge grows to find more and build a perfect combination. Not to mention they'll have a unique look, both in the world and in the inventory. Congrats, you just became a novice expert in artifacts. Now let's talk about what it takes to deliver a visually rich feature like this. To kickstart things, you should plan all the aspects of production you can think of. Of course, you need to have a good understanding of what you're trying to achieve with the feature. In other words, what kind of experience do you want players to have? With artifacts, we wanted to recreate and improve visual aspects and mechanics that were introduced in previous Stalker games. Which meant that we didn't have to start from scratch, and at the same time, for the very same reason, it was crucial to reiterate existing content in terms of how well it blends with the new game and how we can make it even better. So, with artifacts for S.T.A.L.K.E.R.2, goal number 1 was to calculate the overall amount of artifacts we need to populate the game world, so they don't feel mundane or overused. And with such a big game as S.T.A.L.K.E.R.2, this sounded like quite a task. Goal number 2 was to decide on the balance between old artifacts seen in previous games and completely new ones. Goal number 3 was to write all necessary GDD, also known as game design documentation, that would include the required content, description, and logic that needs to be produced. And goal number 4 was to deliver all the artifacts so they would be ready for playtests and possible tweaks. After all goals are set and pre-production was eventually finished, it was time to start production process. Since artifacts are very art-focused feature, it was crucial to start the concept art phase as early as possible. The goal was to explore the maximum amount of ideas visually without any creative or logical restrictions. After our artists finished with that phase, our director was able to pick the best concepts and distribute them between the artifact types, which sadly means that at least 150 concepts were dismissed during this process. Once that was done, the next step was passing these concepts to the 3D department to model a mesh and create a material for it. Later, we had to give mesh some VFX love, so the artifact gets animated if needed, emits certain light, etc. Usually it took up to 3 iterations to finalize VFX. And once that was done, we had the final visual representation of the artifact to be seen in the world. However, animation for artifacts was vertex-based, and some artifacts would definitely benefit from advanced animation. So instead of applying VFX to 3D mesh directly, it was decided to move mesh inside Niagara component of the artifact's blueprints and make it work this way. Funnily enough, this caused alternative issues, like lack of collision support for the artifacts that was initially granted by 3D mesh, which basically meant that players could easily go through artifacts and impacts from explosions, weapons, and other items didn't affect them either. So we had to add an extra transparent sphere component that would add support for such things. After previous stages were ready, the results could be used to generate an icon. It was later used to depict the artifact inside the inventory. Different approaches were used to create icons. At first, this task was given to UI artists, but due to the fact that they don't actually need to work with Unreal Engine to deliver their work, it also meant that Niagara particles would be out of the picture. It was a bit of a hassle to produce icons for artifacts this way. To make it work, at first we provided the artists with the high-definition screenshots of the artifacts in engine, which could be further tweaked within the image editor to produce and recreate everything necessary and make an actual icon. The alternative way was to open 3D Mesh in third-party editor like Blender and render it with its help. But again, the VFX would have to be literally recreated manually to get a proper result. Anyway, none of these approaches aligned with visual quality standards we had in mind. So eventually this task was passed to the art team, who reworked these icons by actually rendering 3D models with Unreal Engine. For this purpose, a specific scene was built with static lightning and camera, which made it possible to capture the artifacts in all their glory. And while artists were doing their thing, I had to address less eye-popping part of the feature, which is distributing type, rarity, and price between artifacts. In this example, we have 6 common artifacts of electric type, with 5 of them from previous games, and 1 entirely new. Also, making a draft of balance for effects was required as well. Here we have the very same electric artifacts and 3 categories of effects distributed between them. The first 2 categories include positive effects, while the third one features a negative one. Each category includes effects of different powers. The higher their value is, the more powerful the effect is. And since we're talking about common artifacts, they offer the minimum bonus and are quite harmful radiation-wise. So once draft effects balance was done, it was a high time to start writing fitting names and descriptions for the artifacts. While the final touch was integrating all these assets to config files and blueprints, so the feature could be playable in the game itself. Sometimes, though, we had to rework certain artifacts for different reasons. For example, this yummy-looking nail-ridden metal plate, fittingly called chocolate, looked like this initially. A pretty dramatic change, right? Sometimes changes like this are necessary in order to keep the quality of the content on a high level. It's not enough just to make an asset that looks cool. It's important to take into consideration how well it will blend in the game itself. You got to answer questions like, will it be visible in the grass? Can you see it at night? Should it rotate upon impact? Does it taste good? Apparently, the original chocolate didn't get a stamp of approval from the art team. But they were happy with the updated version. So, as you can see, things don't always go according to plan. And I will share more development cases like this a bit later. But before we continue, a quick question to you guys. Based on the pipeline I showed you, how many people do you think are required to make one single artifact? Give me numbers if you have any ideas. In English, please. Okay. 10. Okay. Do we have any other ideas? 5, 10. How many? 6. Okay. 5, 6, 10. Any more? 3. Okay. So we have a vast amount of different numbers, like from 3 to 10. So to answer this question and better visualize the answer, let's switch to our next section about delivery process itself and what steps you can take to increase chances for success. After the pre-production phase is done, it's time to start delivering. First, you need to allocate people who will make it happen. And for artifacts required a game designer, obviously, a programmer, economy designer, 2D, 3D, VFX, tech and UI artist, a sound guy, animator, QA, localization manager, and a narrative designer, which makes it 13 people in total. Also, we need an art director, narrative, and game design leads to approve the work, which makes it extra 3 people. Of course, some content is required to be done just once for all artifacts, like sounds, as they are the same for all artifacts. You don't have to develop unique behavior for each and every artifact, so when the general logic is ready and tested, their work is done. The same goes for animations, since they are more connected with characters' behavior than artifacts themselves. Final balancing is not connected to content delivery at all, while QA testing makes more sense when most of the content is ready. The heart is mostly required for specific cases, while leads usually bulk approve batches of content and not separate pieces of it, which kind of reduces the list of the core team to just 7. So any of you who thought it was between 7 and 16, you were right. Congrats. But let's get back to the allocation of required personnel. The best option, of course, is to request team members who have a good understanding of what the feature is. However, it's not always possible, as some of them can be too busy with other work and other things and won't be able to lend you a hand. Happens a lot when people are working on many things simultaneously. The next step is to plan your delivery. Of course, it makes sense to split content between milestones. When it comes to artifacts, the team had to deliver 76 items, which were split into 3 logical groups. The biggest one included 69 artifacts that could be repeatedly found in the zone. As I mentioned before, we have 4 types of artifacts defined by their nature: thermal, chemical, electric, and gravitational. The second group was reserved for 6 unique artifacts, also known as ARC artifacts. They had an alternative production pipeline as their background was different from other artifacts. While most of the artifacts in the zone are an abstraction, like this little fella over there, ARC artifacts represent real-world items with supernatural abilities, just like this boat over there. Production-wise, this meant that they have reused item meshes that were already created by 3D team for other purposes. Also, some of them required 2 different inventory icons to indicate charged and uncharged states. Also, sometimes with ARC artifacts, an additional step was required to achieve a desired appearance. For this purpose, extra materials were created by the Tech-R department. But let's go back to the third group of artifacts. It included a single artifact that was also unique, but could be acquired only through the main storyline. The number 1 goal was to deliver content for the biggest group, which included 69 artifacts. So for each milestone, the team aimed to deliver all content for at least 5 artifacts of each type, making it 20 artifacts in total. And just in case color coding for artifacts types faded away, this is a handy reminder. So back to milestones. The first 3 milestones were dedicated to delivering most of the content, while the 4th milestone was split between remaining artifacts, possible polish, and reworks. Each milestone took about a month and resulted in integration, QA testing, and merging of the new batch of artifacts into the main project branch. So anyone in the studio could use it for their purposes and give feedback. And before we continue, here's a few details on how we managed to test 70+ items to bulk check their appearance, effects, naming, descriptions, world physics, VFX, etc. There are a few ways to make this happen, and those of you who had similar experience know them. The most obvious one is to create a test level and place each item individually, so when the scene is launched, you can approach an item and do what you need. The alternative and painful way is to spawn all required items one by one in the inventory, or make someone on the dev team update the debug tool with spawn all items button. What I did though was creating a custom item generator prototype that included all the artifacts and was assigned to be spawned in the specific container. So after all items were spawned, I just transferred them into the inventory and tested them. This was much faster than spawning them individually, creating a test level, or involve the dev team. Sometimes, as you can imagine, issues were found, and the milestone that followed had to pick up any technical debt, including planned but unfinished content and changes that were required to be introduced. The key for successful completion of these milestones was effective communication, and I will share a few tips that can make it easier for you. To deliver a lot of content and meet deadlines, you need a way to efficiently and effectively communicate with your team. It's one thing when all team members are located in one room and can be easily accessed at any time throughout the business hours. However, you might find yourself in a situation when you have a team that lives in different time zones, or working in a big company that occupies separate floors, or even a combination of everything above. So whenever you are not able to use a whiteboard to track your progress and talk to everyone directly on a daily basis, you might need the following unless you already do. A task manager software of your choosing to populate a backlog for your team, something like Jira or simpler, and an app for instant communication. To make it clear, emails are not quick, as most people don't have a habit to check them regularly. Leaving comments in documents or task managers is not quick either, as notifications end up in emails as well. What is quick, though, is Slack. At least this is what we used while developing artifacts. Anyway, once you're done with the infrastructure, arrange an introductory call, meeting with your team to talk about your plans. Make sure that everyone knows what is the scope of the current milestone and what are the responsibilities of each member. After meeting ends, publish a recap, which will have all the results of your meeting in the text form. And don't forget to tag responsible people and what you expect from them. When tasks are populated and goals for milestones are set, observe the process and highlight the progress. For example, posting some screenshots and sharing videos of accomplishments will illustrate current achievements of the team and just might inspire people to work further. Let's say your milestone lasts 1 month. This means that you can review the activity of your team each week on Monday to address problems and possible risks. Also, a word of advice, you can use emojis in your reports to better visualize the progress. This will help everyone understand the current state of things easier. If you realize that there is a possibility that some content is not going to be delivered on time, don't hesitate to ping responsible people to find out if there are any blockers or issues. Remember that these people might be busy with other things, so try to be nice if possible. Since we have already discussed how things need to be done, let's talk about how things actually happen in real life. As promised before, I'm going to share 3 cases as an example. The first case is connected with naming of the artifacts. As I have mentioned before, I have joined GSC back in 2021, which means that the game has already been in development for quite a while. And when I was assigned as a delivery owner of artifacts, there was already some work done, including template names for 69 artifacts. 29 of them originated from previous games, and we didn't want to change their names for the lore reasons. But there were still 40 more to handle. And if you recall the artifact production pipeline I mentioned earlier, these artifacts were integrated in config files independently to visuals, which means they weren't supported by any finalized content whatsoever and served as mere placeholders. And this work that has been made in advance proved to be the source of the future problems. All these template names were included in the config file that was used by the engine to spawn actual artifacts in the game. Apart from that, they were also used in localization tool and some quest blueprints, which meant changing those names in the config file could result in issues with artifacts in the game itself. And since we didn't want anything unexpected to happen, a decision was made to leave all draft names as is. The only thing that changed is their file name in localization tool after narrative designers picked one. Still, this solution came with a price, as we had to simultaneously operate with draft names, final names, and also with technical naming of the 3D meshes as they used their own naming policy. So whenever a team member from different departments needed to synchronize, it was a bit of a hassle to understand which specific artifact they're talking about. The bottom line here is that agreeing upon and using the same naming policy for all departments as early as possible will save you a lot of time and nerves in the future. And while we're at it, a few related stories. Initially, to pick names for artifacts, we planned to run an all-company poll, so all GSC employees could suggest names based on artifacts' appearance. We wanted artifacts to be named as if the stalkers themselves gave those names to them. But due to time limits, only 4 people were involved in this process: a writer who suggested the name, me, and our leads. Maybe it's for the best, as it's quite hard to pick only one from the dozens and not to hurt anyone's feelings in the process. Next story. One of the definitions of done for artifacts was writing documentation for each one of them, with all necessary information about it, like visuals, type, rarity, lore, if applicable, and use cases. This task was completed, but as you might have heard, we had a fire in the office at some point of development. I know this meme is used all the time, but I feel like I have a really good reason to use it. Long story short, only a fraction of all documents survived. Still, by that time, our writer already used them to create fitting names for all artifacts. Also, thankfully, I had a Google Sheet I used to track progress for all artifacts, and it included all vital information. So the bottom line here is that having as many backups as possible is always a good idea. Let's take a look at the next case now regarding effects of the artifacts. Just like with artifact names, there were also draft effects assigned to them. Here you can see our good old friends from previous slides, electric common artifacts, accompanied by a few more uncommon ones. All of them have positive and negative effects on players. For illustrative purposes, let's take a closer look at a battery artifact. When I started to work on artifacts, it already had draft positive effect, which provided players with some basic resistance to electricity and applied a certain radiation debuff. Also, this artifact was present in all previous games, but its effects underwent certain evolution with time. As you can see, it all started out as a positive effects only artifact with the same electricity resistant bonus. Then it acquired alternative powers and affected stamina ever since, with radiation debuff on top of that. So after I researched the evolution of effects for all artifacts, I found a certain pattern which helped me to come up with the concept I decided to follow. To be more exact, I wanted effects to make sense based on the type of the artifact and to let artifacts override effects of each other, so it was possible to get positive buffs only. When it comes to buffs, artifacts found in electric anomalies would grant characters additional resistance to electric damage. The same goes for fire and chemical types of artifacts, which, while gravity would give a buff to maximum weight of the items, character could carry without debuffs. Also, each type of artifact, except chemical ones, was assigned with additional positive effect that was logically connected to the nature of the artifact. For example, artifacts spawned in electric anomalies would slow down the stamina consumption, while thermal artifacts would stop bleeding in the best traditions of Rambo movies. Regarding the negative effects, all types of artifacts, again except chemical ones, had a debuff of radiation being applied to unprotected characters. The power of this negative effect would decrease based on the rarity of the artifact. So the most common artifacts would be the most dangerous, while the rarest ones would have minimal debuff. At the same time, chemical artifacts had no additional buffs, which was a debuff in a way itself, as the amount of artifacts you can use at the same time is limited to 5. This worked pretty well on paper. However, later on, it appeared that players preferred not to use artifacts during the early stages of the game. The reasons for this are the following. You need to look for them, and their spawn is not guaranteed. And the amount of chemical anomalies that override radiation debuff is limited due to the logic of their placement. You would expect chemical anomalies to be placed inside certain buildings or maybe caves, so not every place is good for those. Also, anomaly damage decreases durability of the equipment, while players try to catch the artifacts, and fixing equipment is pricey. This made us think about re-evaluating the design, so we are considering certain changes, like removing debuffs from some of the common artifacts to increase chances they could be used early in the game. And also maybe add an extra positive effect to all artifacts, including chemical ones. So what would be the lesson here? The first one would be that features cannot be developed in vacuum. In this particular case, the world building process should have been taken into consideration, so it could have a bigger impact on the way effects were distributed and designed. Also, more playtesting before release could highlight this problem. But as it happens, there is never enough time to do all the things you want. Before we get to the next case, a bit of trivia. Initially, the descriptions of the artifacts were intended to be more specific regarding the effects they will apply to players. Still, there was a possibility that effects will change in the future, so we asked writers to avoid this. And since the effects did change eventually, this proved to be a very good idea. But what was their description based, if not on their effects? Just like with the names, a writer had to use their imagination and base descriptions on the visuals of the artifacts. Another piece of trivia regarding effects is the reason behind indicating their power with text and not numbers. After the balance team went through the bonus effects for artifacts, the numbers were tweaked in a way that they were looking really insignificant, even though they made absolute sense balance-wise, of course. Would you like to get a plus 0.2 bonus to bleeding resistance? Would this look sufficient enough? Probably not. So we talked and decided it would be more informative to replace those numbers with text instead. For artifacts, we didn't have to deal with effects and their powers at all, as we deliberately decided not to show effects so players would have an opportunity to discover those themselves. However, this time we did mention the effects in the description, not in a very specific way, but just to give a hint. Another piece of trivia, not sure if you're aware of this, but at some point our build leaked, as it was kindly reported by PC Gamer back in the day. I won't lie, it wasn't the best day in my life or life of my team, but what do they say? If life gives you lemons, make a lemonade. So what I did was the following. I looked for, let's call it early feedback, to see if there was anything useful there and if we can test some of the theories we had within the team. So we have already covered naming and effects issues. Let's wrap this up with a third case. It's not directly connected with the production, but has its roots in it. In S.T.A.L.K.E.R.2, you are able to take a closer look at any artifacts you find in the zone. There are two ways to do so. By using the contextual menu in the inventory, or through system notifications in the HUD. It sounds like a tiny little fun feature that is easy to implement, but it required extra work from game designers, animators, devs, UI, UX, localization, QA, while offering mostly aesthetical value to the player. However, lack of an easy way to investigate artifacts closely meant that one of the key features of the game that required hundreds of hours to be made wasn't properly showcased in the game itself. And even though you could kind of take a closer look at the artifact while picking it up, hopefully we will see the video. This short demonstration didn't do much justice to the visual part of the feature. Like, you could see it for a little brief moment when you're picking it up closely. One of the compromises for this issue was an artifact room in S.T.A.L.K.E.R., which is one of the locations in the game. In case you wondered what S.T.A.L.K.E.R. stands for, it's Scientific Institute for Research of Chernobyl Anomalous Area. Unfortunately, it could hold only 39 of 65 artifacts made for the game. The other thing that didn't really go according to plan with this room is the ambient light emitted by the artifacts. And as you can see from this test video, each artifact has a very specific light emission. So the idea was to pick up the most beautiful, based on my subjective opinion, of course, and rare artifacts and place them within the room in a very specific order to form a light pattern. Something similar to Christmas lights to create a mood of getting into a miracle land where everything is possible. Unfortunately, due to a very unique light in S.T.A.L.K.E.R. overall, the light emitted by artifacts located in the room had to be adjusted, and it turned out to be not as magical as I intended it to be. Also, sadly, you can't get any of those artifacts in your possession. Eventually, thanks to the enthusiasm of a group of interested people, and specifically artists who poured their time and soul into it, the artifact overview feature made it into the release version of the game after all. So instead of just getting a closer look at the artifacts in S.T.A.L.K.E.R. environment, players are able to get a unique experience of gazing at an artifact they just hunted down. And here goes a very important lesson. Before deciding on how much time and other resources you are ready to invest into producing content, understand its value for the player and the game itself. Also, don't piss off artists. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Hi, thank you very much for the conference. So I had a question for the artifact. At any point, did you consider to have like the inspection being done automatically when picking up the artifact? Like in some game, when you pick up a new weapon, you have your character looking at it for a few seconds. Because it would have been, I guess, a first ID for how to put it in upfront for the player?
Thank you for your question. We did consider things like that, but zone is not exactly a walk in the park. So when you pick up artifact, you might be in the combat situation, and taking away the control from the player seemed like a bad idea. So we assumed that you will do this when you have time, maybe in your little cozy bunker somewhere. So that was the idea.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to give this talk to you guys, and au revoir.